and get started our session with a Quran recitation by Sister Ramla. فليتفضل مشكورا ومأجورا. Sister Ramla, inshallah, you can go ahead and get started.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
And afwan Abaya, give me 2 minutes, inshallah. Just 1 minute. I'm about to park.
Okay, inshallah, no problem.
Right.
Inshallah, in the meantime, everyone, while the Ustad is speaking, if you can stay muted, inshallah, we'll keep the questions for later. So save your questions or you can drop in the chat for later. But the whole time, inshallah, make sure you're muted. Jazakallahu khairan. And Ramla, inshallah, will soon recite the Quran for us.
Assalamu alaikum. So Bilan, everybody is muted anyways, by default.
Okay.
So therefore, if you want somebody to go on the mic as a co-host, that is you would have to, I guess, just unmute them or ask them to unmute. So that way it would be easier for all of us. The other thing is that if you would like to record this, you can record it if you want. Are you able to see that you're able to record it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can record it if you want.
Inshallah, Jazakallahu khairan. I will do that.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm so sorry, sisters. I was just about to park, inshallah. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the Quran, inshallah. I hope my voice is clear before I start, just to confirm.
Yes.
Inshallah, jazakallahu khairan. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. أتأمرون الناس بالبر وتنسون أنفسكم وأنتم تتلون الكتاب أفلا تعقلون واستعينوا بالصبر والصلاة وإنها لكبيرة إلا على الخاشعين الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو ربهم وأنهم إليه راجعون يا بني إسرائيل اذكروا نعمتي التي أنعمت عليكم وأني فضلتكم على العالمين واتقوا يوما لا تجزي نفس عن نفس شيئا ولا يقبل منها شفاعة ولا يؤخذ منها عدل ولا هم ينصرون صدق الله العظيم جزاكم الله خيرا.
Jazakallahu khairan for the beautiful recitation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve you. Inshallah, now I would like to welcome Ma'an Ayyan to continue the program for us. Tafaddal, Ma'an Ayyan.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. One second, sorry, I can't. Okay. Jazakallah khair. I'm unable to start video. Is it?
So
Is this being-
I purposely disabled videos because I worry that many sisters will not recognize that their videos are on.
Okay.
So they come in, so I disable the videos on purpose. So now I abled you to start your video. So just heads up, that's why I disable all videos.
Oh, Jazakallah khair, Shaykha.
Now you're allowed to put the video if that's what your choice is.
Okay. And is this being live streamed?
It is.
Okay. I'd rather not use my video then. Inshallah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. It's such an honor and privilege to welcome our Shaykha, our Ustada, Dr. Shaykha Aysha Wazwaz. A little biography of her. This is just a brief biography of her. Obviously, she's done many things for the community. And just to start off with, Dr. Shaykha Aysha Wazwaz is an American-born Muslim scholar who has a BA in Islamic law from Al-Qudus University in Jerusalem, Palestine. She also has an MA in Contemporary Islamic Studies, presented MA thesis under the title of The Portrayal of Islam and Muslims in the Neo-Conservative Media in the USA. She has earned her PhD in Islamic Studies from Jannah University with an honors, in addition to having a great deal of teaching experience around the world, including holding women's classes in Masjid al-Aqsa itself. She is the CEO and founder of Gems of Lights. She also holds halaqas, as well as tafsir classes, as well as other initiatives in the community as well. She's very involved and is also one of the few Muslim women scholars of today, inshallah ta'ala, of the West. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve her. And without further ado, we are very excited to have her and inshallah ta'ala learn from her. Welcome, Shaykha.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah khairan, all of you, for joining us, and as well being part of the class, and even organizing this very important topic. It's a very hard topic to talk about, because when we actually talk about balancing dunya and akhirah, many times what comes to mind is that they're somehow supposed to be two different things. But in Islam, it's not necessarily a separable thing, in where dunya is actually the bridge to Akhirah, but it can be this bridge that basically leads you to hellfire and can lead you to Jannah. It's the bridge, but you determine on which direction or these two intersections on what you want of your dunya. And that's why in Islam, when we speak about dunya leading to akhirah, that's the main part of it, in where how do we basically understand our priorities in Islam in order to have this dunya lead me to akhirah. And they shouldn't be antagonists. They shouldn't be, opposing each other. As a matter of fact, they're actually supposed to be part of one another. And therefore, to think of it as, well, one is the opposite of the other is going to be coming from a Christian perspective that regards that each one is supposed to be somehow opposing the other. The other part is, well, if they're not antagonists to each other, they're not opposing one another, then that actually means there's a priority. How do I understand the priority? What do I consider first, second, and how do I put in my priorities within this dunya in order to get me to the akhirah? Sometimes I can have conflicting moments. So therefore, how do I actually identify these priorities? And let's put some examples as well later on down the road. And of course, in order to understand priorities, I think it's really important to understand that there is actually a whole field in Islam. It's called fiqh of priorities. I do have a lecture in regards to that, in where how do I understand what comes first? How do I understand, especially in situations when they're probably somehow conflicting? Do I first go and pray? Or what if my husband needs me for something? Or what if my children need me for something? What if I have a job and I'm worried that I might lose my job? How do I consider my priorities? And of course, when we want to speak about the priorities, it's important. So for the admin, please admit them. Admit those that are trying to come in. That way you can, keep the numbers coming. Now, a very important thing is there's a rule that we're going to talk about, which is a rule in almost each and every single class of mine. It's basically the rule called DNAIM. We're going to get there. Every single person that attended any of my lectures knows the simple acronym, the DNAIM. I'm going to get to explaining the DNAIM because if you actually understand this simple rule right here, then you're really going to have kind of like this lens that's going to walk you through every single step of your way. It's going to be like this flashlight that's going to help you figure out your priorities. It's going to figure out and make the right decisions, and also going to help you set that path, kind of like a GPS type of thing, and where, oh, okay, well, now I know where I'm heading. Now I can understand my priorities. So we're going to get to that DNAIM. I'm just letting you kind of get like a table of contents for you to understand how we're going to be going throughout our class. So we're going to explain the DNAIM. The DNAIM, the Deen, that acronym basically stands. The D stands for the Deen. The N stands for the nafs, the A stands for aql, the I stands for ird, the M stands for men. In English, the D stands for religion and piety, the N stands for life and the preservation of life, the A stands for the preservation of mental health, the I stands for the preservation of family and chastity, and the M stands for the preservation of wealth. Now, this is not something that I had invented, but this is actually derived from the Quran and Sunnah to help us understand the vertebra of justice and priority within Islam to understand the life around us. And this is what we would call the legal maxims of prioritization in Islam. Now, there are a number of different things because, of course, the majority, the people joining us here are probably going to be considering, okay, the issues that they are concerned about, education, marriage, seeking marriage, what to look for, and so forth. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I think it's really important to cover first the topic in a crude way to help us understand the philosophy of considering our priorities, the philosophy of considering how we would balance our dunya and our akhirah as well. Now, but before I get into that, is there such a thing, or is there any basis for the fiqh of priorities, or even any of that type of balance? Where do I actually get that from? So it's not a personal perspective coming from me and telling you, hey, this is what I think you should do, and here's your priority. Because when we speak about fiqh of priorities, or we speak about the fiqh of balance, we basically go back to certain resources to help us identify our rules, our ethics, or let's say the angle of perspective. We would go back to the Quran, we would go back to the Sunnah, we would go back to these different resources to help us identify how we actually make our thinking to be founded on Islam and not really motivated by our own feelings or probably the society around us. And of course, because that other side is going to take us into Jahiliyyah. Now, the other part of it is definitely, yes, you might say, well, those texts are probably not related to us. That's why, in order to us to make sure that we're not creating our own perspective just because a culture is dictating what our priorities are, or probably what balance looks like, etc. That's why we would consider a number of different resources, whether it's the actions of the Sahaba, their reports, how they understood Islam, or even the different legal maxims in where it's laid out in the Quran and Sunnah, blocking the means of evil, considering culture, considering removing the harm. All those different areas are actually part of it. So when we say balancing dunya and akhirah, I'm basically saying that the Quran itself, if you think, well, wait a minute, no, there is a serious matter here, we're basically considering and taking that in consideration. In other words, this is not dismissing dunya, but this is to say that the Quran itself, that Islam itself, is indeed putting dunya and even the masalih dunya, even the interest in your dunya, taking it in consideration. Well, that's why Ibn al-Qayyim had said that no, that Sharia was laid out in the start for really the interest and the benefit of human beings. In other words, this is not at all dismissing and disregarding dunya, but this is to help us. Sharia is to help you navigate your life in a way that is for your sake. Why for my sake? Because you are not just body, you are body, mind, heart, and soul. In all those different areas, they actually function within a number of different areas, whether we're talking about the psychological part, or whether we're talking about the health physical part, or whether we're talking about the social part, or whether we're talking about the financial part. All of these areas, Islam takes them, and Islam is the only religion that takes all these different areas and all these different dynamics in consideration and lays out a way to help you balance not only your life outside, your financial situation, your social relations, your psychological, your health and your mental health, but it also considers your spirituality as well in the light. Now, this is important to mention. in the light of the essence that preceded your existence. Let's do it again. All of this balance is taking in consideration the essence that preceded your existence. In other words, if you're walking down a path, the path, it's not enough to get to destination A or B or C or whatever it is, but it's important to ask yourself, why did I even start this path from the beginning? Where is this path actually leading me to? At many times, it can happen that you're in the path and you're just thinking about the path, and then you forget the main reason why you took the path. You start getting busy. And of course, because we're human beings, sometimes it's hard for us to, make a focus that's on the far end. And we get so focused on destination A that sometimes we even forget, wait a minute, did you forget the main idea of where you were heading? So that's why Islam is always focused on the essence that preceded your existence. And therefore, when Islam is taking in the balance, it's basically telling you, well, it's the balance that's not forgetting the main purpose of why you were created in the beginning. It's basically taking consideration that the main purpose was your akhirah. So the question is, well, if you would want to say that there is a priority or there is a balance, or that some things in Islam are more important than others, aren't you making this up? Well, let's see. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, tells us the story of Ahl al-Kahf and tells us أما السفينة فكانت لمساكين يعملون في البحر فأردت أن أعيبها وأن وراءهم ملك يأخذ كل سفينة غصبا. You could see that there is an idea to that man that basically, whether his name is al-Khadr or not is not the issue, but he made a hole inside that ship, and the ship basically sunk before even getting to the destination. Prophet Musa alayhi salam was bewildered. Why would you do such an evil thing? But then he explained to him that, well, what these people that are on the ship don't recognize is that there are pirates down the road, that anybody that would pass by it, that they would actually end up probably, well, most likely, in fact, they will be getting they will be getting, one, their ship looted, two, they would be getting killed, and they don't recognize what's up ahead. So he basically had to do this evil thing, which is going to be not an evil thing, but it's going to be a relative issue, because what Prophet Musa alayhi salam had seen evil. The truth of the matter is that there was a priority. The priority was to protect their wealth and to protect their lives from getting looted and from losing their life down the road because of those pirates there. So that's why Yusuf al-Qardawi, Dr. Yusuf al-Qardawi, rahimahullah, he said, so if the ship were to stay, it would have been a lot more important for them, and their priority would be, well, we'd rather have a hole in the ship and some kind of a default in ship than actually lose the whole ship and lose their lives. And that's why you could see, with the same idea, in where considering priorities, weighing the odds, and weighing different things is part of Islam itself. Let's see, look at this ayah. وَلَا تَسُبُّوا الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَيَسُبُّوا اللَّهَ عَدْوًا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ كَذَلِكَ زَيَّنَّا لِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ عَمَلَهُمْ ثُمَّ إِلَى رَبِّهِمْ مَرْجِعُهُمْ. What was that actually talking about? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, do not mock or harm the gods or the idols of the other faiths, because what they might retaliate in is probably harming or swearing, or probably somehow even harming the religion, harming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, harming Islam itself. So what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us? Well, he tells us, well, I want you to avoid doing something that's going to provoke an unexpected behavior that might result in a bigger harm. And that's the same thing in where there's certain things, whether we're talking about in dealing with other let's say minorities or other groups, or whether we were talking about social relations or wealth, or whether we're talking about freedoms. Let's look at this one. ولا يضربن بأرجلهن ليعلم ما يخفين من زينتهن. Well, this ayah is saying that they should not strike with their feet to reveal the hidden beauty that is. The hidden beauty. What wasn't it supposed to be that she's got the freedom, she just wants to dress and she just wants to get some attraction, etc.? Isn't that supposed to be personal freedom? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's say, reduce the personal freedom in order to protect her from different behaviors that might be unexpected, that might be misunderstood by others, that she's actually seeking attraction, she's seeking other people to basically stop her way, recognize that she's there looking for a good catch. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, don't strike with your feet, because we definitely don't want you to reveal the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to hide. And then we also basically, the main reason for that is to make sure that you are protected in your ird, you are protected in your chastity, in your honor. So therefore, considering, for example, diminishing or reducing freedom for the sake, now here's the point, for the sake of getting a more important priority, which is to preserve her honor, is basically considered that this is the weight. Same thing here, that yes, there might be some benefit in where by you somehow attacking other gods or the other religions' gods, you might see that there's some benefit in it. You might think that there's some benefit in it, that, oh, it's probably going to get some power, some authority, some at least pride for the Muslims. But the truth of the matter is that when you weigh it, you might actually put the Muslim community in danger. You might actually provoke a lot of unexpected behavior that might even put the religion in danger. So therefore, weighing the different odds and weighing the pros and the cons is actually a matter that is taught by Islam itself. So when you see, not only in the Quran, but you would see that the Prophet ﷺ also practiced that even when he was dealing with the different ways that he was dealing in doing his da'wah in Islam, in where the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that if the first things that were revealed in the Quran or in Islam were do not commit zina, do not steal, then the people would, because of their hatred on the religion, they would have probably said that's the first thing that we're going to do, just to somehow go against the revelation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered that the priority was learn the foundations of Aqidah, the foundations of creed. Once that is set, then you will have the community itself strong to accept whatever it takes, no matter what the sacrifice was, in order to stay connected with the foundation that was there. The Prophet ﷺ, the idols in the Kaaba were not demolished till the idols were actually abolished from their hearts. And therefore, when you look at the heart, that's the foundation where we would consider the Aqidah as the priority. The other piece, the Prophet ﷺ, when he knew and he had known who the hypocrites were, but he did not attack or kill the hypocrites, despite all the division that they were causing in the community, which nearly had created a huge division, especially during the Battle of Tabuk. But when Umar ibn al-Khattab had said, well, let me just slit their throats, let me just kill them, the Prophet ﷺ said, I worry that they might say Muhammad is killing his friends. I worry that they might say Muhammad is killing his friends. Of course, the many stories in regard to that are plenty, but when we want to look at the other ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked, what are the best actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do? He mentioned, as-salatu li waqtiha. Here's a number one. When you want to balance, you want to consider the first thing that you want to put forward is your salah on time. Then what? When the Prophet ﷺ was asked, he said, birrul walidain, being good to your parents. Then, when he was asked, then what? He said, jihad fi sabilillah, fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you look at this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is telling you that there are certain things that should always be a priority. When and what are we considering as the priority? Now, you can see that in other ahadith, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, for example, in another situation, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, what is the best of action? And he said, faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. Then what? And then he said, al-jihadu fi sabilillah. Does that mean it's contradictory to one another? Does that mean that this report is contradicting this report? So the Prophet ﷺ, a lot of the responses were really based on the circumstance and based on the person that is asking. So one person might ask, give me a wasiyah, give me a will, and he'll tell him, la taghdab, don't be angry, learn how to control your tantrums. Another sahabi might ask, well, tell me what's a priority, what's the most important thing that I should be focused on? And he would tell him to consider salah. Another sahabi, each one, he would give him a different response. Does that mean that each and every single person is given a different response because Islam is contradictory? No, it depends on the situation. It depends on the person that is asking. It depends on the person's weakness, on the person's weakness. And therefore, once we recognize the diagnose and once we recognize the person, him or herself, that's when we're capable of giving what is it, what does it mean, and what is a priority, and what does it mean to actually consider a balance. When I talk about priorities, that means we're talking about a balance as well. So when it's not enough to just say, well, here, I just want to practice that one because this one, the Prophet ﷺ said it. Well, yes, but you want to keep in mind that he gave different responses based on the circumstances of each and every single person. So therefore, you also have to know your weakness as well. You cannot necessarily just regard things based on your perspective. What suits others might not suit you necessarily, but there are certain priorities in the deen that you must take in consideration as a balance first. So the first thing you want to balance is your deen. We'll get there, inshallah. But wait a minute. I thought the Prophet ﷺ, like Sayyidah Aysha here said, ما خير رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بين أمرين إلا أخذ واختار أيسرهما ما لم يكن إثما فإن كان إثما كان أبعد الناس منه وما انتقم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لنفسه في شيء قط إلا أن تنتهك حرمة الله فينتقم الله تعالى فينتقم الله تعالى. Now here's one thing, is that Sayyidah Aisha said that every single time the Prophet ﷺ is given the option to choose from two different items or matters, he would actually choose whatever is easier, unless this matter was a sin or a transgression, of course. If it is a transgression, then he would be the farthest away from that behavior or that action. And even when it came to retaliating or probably somehow stopping or abandoning something, the Prophet ﷺ would not do it for himself. In other words, he wasn't considering that the things around him, how does it relate to me personally? But he would actually consider that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center, and therefore, whether he is retaliating or whether what he's responding to, in other words, we're talking about a normal action that we as human beings might do in retaliation to the world around us. Usually we consider ourselves as the center. So Sayyida Aisha was saying, well, he wasn't considering himself as the center. He was considering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the center. So what does the whole thing really mean? That when you want to balance, the balance is supposed to be not on the basis of easiest alone, but it should be easiest based on the center of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, there are certain guidelines for considering the balance. Number one is that obligations precede recommended and liked actions. So therefore, you recognize that if you've got an obligation, how do I balance that and that? Well, if the dunya matter contradicts an obligation that you must do, then therefore you start with the obligation. If you had the time to do other things, well, at least you recognize that your duty in the obligation is supposed to be met first. If you had the energy, if you had the money, if you had the time to do other things, well, good for you. Number two is that طلب الأعلى is actually supposed to be, so please admit people, for the admin, please, the co-host, admit people. Seeking high virtues precedes other less important virtues. So what does that mean? When you actually consider your balance, you always want to consider what is of a higher virtue before you actually consider a less virtue. It happens a lot where I would girls wanting to volunteer, for example, at the masjid, at a daycare, at who knows, some probably work, donation work, whatever it is, they'll want to somehow volunteer there, and their mother, they're leaving her behind, or they don't want to participate and volunteer. It's like, no, you volunteer at home, and that's of a higher virtue than volunteering at the masjid or volunteering at some orphan center or orphan center or whatever it is. You've got your priorities, and this is important to consider, because if you don't consider your balance right, you're going to find yourself confused. You're going to find yourself really missing out on your virtues, missing out on your obligations, and really lost, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or sorry, the Prophet ﷺ actually said, "Ma amartukum bihi fa'tu minhu mastata'tum." What I ordered you to do, then do as much as you're capable of doing. And what I forbid you of doing, then stop immediately. مَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا. Then stop immediately. What is that supposed to teach us? So this basically teaches us, that your obligations come first, and then your obligations, although yes, they do come first, but if you want to jump, you won't be able to jump unless you bent down a little bit, pushed against the gravity to go up. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he said, وَمَا نَهَيْتُكُمْ عَنْهُ فَانْتَهُوا, and what I forbid you from doing, then stop immediately. That actually means that when it comes to Sharia, the items and the things that are forbidden, it is never going to be a priority. Now, keep that in mind. If something is haram, there is no way that that is a matter that you cannot let go of. You might say, but it's hard. It's hard if your vision, see, when you look at hellfire and you look at the حفت الجنة بالشهوات بالمكاره وحفت النار بالشهوات. If you're going to look at hellfire and all you see around hellfire are the things that are pleasurable, you might look at the pleasurable things and just focus on that, and then therefore Jahannam would be blurry in your eyes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, let the shahawat be the area of your blur and focus on hellfire, and that way you will not live the delusion, you will not live the confusion. So therefore, taking in consideration that haram is never an option, but it's going to be hard. Remember, Jannah is not easy to get to. What you want to do is learn how to consider that your balance is between mubah and wajibat, mubah and obligations, something that is permissible and obligations. This is not a balance between haram and obligations, because haram is not supposed to be within the category in the first place. Haram was to be avoided in the first place. It's not whatsoever part of the balance. It's not supposed to be part of what we're talking about here, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never forbid something on you that is important, that is crucial for your existence. There's no way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would never forbid something that is haram and that is not healthy for you. Number 4, al-ikhfa' fi at-tatawwu'at awla min al-izhar. When you want to do different behaviors, you want to do different things, concealing the rituals, concealing and hiding the good that you're doing is important, and it precedes revealing them. Why? Because preserving your sincerity is also a priority. The other part is that learning your aqidah is preceding learning Sharia. What does that mean? Learning the main creed, learning what your Islam stands for, precedes learning Sharia. Therefore, that would also mean learning your deen precedes learning any other degree. So therefore, to balance your dunya and akhirah, before getting your degrees in, who knows, biology, nursing, whatever it is, you have to consider that learning your deen is a priority and is not a secondary thing. Therefore, joining in learning your deen and the classes and investing in that is more important and should be at the start of the balance. Then if you had more time to do other things, then do it. The other part, that the things that will have a bigger harm are to be considered before the lesser evil. The other part, the things that have a higher benefit are supposed to be considered at a higher balance than the things that have a less benefit. Now, those are the different guidelines for balance. But when we're speaking about balancing, there is another part and another piece for the balance. Number 1 is that there are certain necessities that Islam regards as one of the reasons in order to preserve, number one, your deen and your nafs, your life, your aql, your mental health, your ird, your chastity / your family, your wealth, in how you're getting it and how it's spent. Those are daruriyat. Those are necessities. But let's not get confused. What is a necessity? A necessity, I can say, well, I've got a necessity. I need the money, so therefore, let me open a liquor store because I need to buy a house. Well, that's not, the house is a necessity, but a necessity, in order for it to be permissible to actually commit when those necessities are in danger, is when you don't have an alternative. When can the person drink alcohol? Only if you did not have any other mean of drinking any other things and your life was in danger. That's the only time that you can consider الضرورات تبيح المحظورات. So this is what we're talking about in terms of darurat. The other thing is basically al-hajiyat. Remember, if you're going to balance, learning to balance what is a necessity and learning the definition of necessity, and then learning the definition of al-hajiyat. What are al-hajiyat? Al-hajiyat are needs, different needs, but the daruriyat are things that your life must have. That's the basis. That's the basic. That's the basis of your life. Al-hajiyat, they're actually removing the hardship in life and religion, but it does not reach to the point of destruction. In daruriyat, if we are not to preserve deen, then that's going to lead to fitna. If we're not preserving people's lives, then we're actually coming across a community that's just nothing but crime. And the list goes on and on. So Islam regarded for al-hajiyat, if they're not met, it can cause hardship, but not to the point of a destruction. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ وَلَا يُرِيدُ بِكُمُ الْعُسْرَ. The general balance is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told us that when it comes to hardship, with every hardship there's ease, but that doesn't mean once I find making wudu just a little challenging, I'll just say, well, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Not quite, because there are four main things in Islam. Expect that these things are actually a basis in your life and there's no way out. Number one, recognizing justice. In order for you to live Islam, you first have to recognize what is the principle, what is justice, what is the foundation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me to abide by. Two, expect a hardship. That's why we have to talk about sabr. That's a balance. If you want to balance dunya and akhirah, there's no way that you would think that the balance is going to be easy. There is going to be some hardship. And when we say sabr, that actually means there's a sacrifice to pay. There is a hardship. There's going to be a struggle. We're not saying patience to mean patience, just some kind of a psychological therapeutic thing. We're actually talking about expect that your life might be at risk, your health might be at risk, your money might be at risk at times, but it only is going to be at certain times going to be saying, well, if that's going to be at risk, then we're going to say darurat tabih al-mahdurat. But that's not for random people to give themselves the fatwa to let themselves ease Islam for them. Because when you want to practice Islam, yes, there's going to be some sacrifice to give. There's going to be a challenge. Don't necessarily think balancing dunya and akhirah, oh, it's just supposed to be easy. No, there is a price to pay. 2, 3, there's iffah. You're going to be definitely, with balancing dunya and akhirah, you're going to be finding a lot of different things in dunya at the expense of akhirah, telling you, well, here's an offer that's going to make your life easier. Swipe, interest, bigger home, and will basically make it into riba in different payments, and it's going to be easier for your life. And it sounds although easy, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, be careful, because you can't practice your Islam unless you practice iffah, satisfaction. What does it mean to have satisfaction? It means to limit yourself to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had permitted in order to hold on to your principle. Even if other things are probably easier and making your life easier, live the satisfaction and recognize that there is a price to pay. And many will offer you eases for your dunya at the expense of your deen. 4, courage. There's no way that you can balance dunya and akhirah without living in courage. Living in courage doesn't mean that there is no fear, but it just means you learn how to redirect your focus from looking at fear to looking at the act and the nobility that it carries in order to live in courage. And that's why Islam basically teaches us that you need to redirect your focus. Don't look at the different taraf, luxury that might be offered, but in order to balance dunya and akhirah, recognize that indeed there's gonna be some fitna, there's gonna be some hardship. There are going to be those that will offer you some ease at the expense of your deen, and it's going to require a strong heart that redirects its focus from looking at dunya loss to seeing that I'm up for akhirah. That's what it means. Balancing dunya and akhirah takes us to another category, at-tahsiniyat. What does that mean? Ash-Shatibi, a Maliki scholar, and one of the most and smartest scholars, to be honest, he said, when al-akhdu bima yaliq من محاسن العادات وتجنب الأحوال المدنسات التي تألفها العقول الراجحات. Now, one thing, Ash-Shatibi said, it's basically taking the different things that might actually be making your life easier, and also avoiding the different things that might regress you in a different way. Even, of course, it might regress your life, but what you're trying to seek is to avoid the regressions in life. That's what at-tahsiniyat are. They're basically just different things. So most of it, different supporting necessities and the needs, etc. But when you're looking at tahsiniyat, that's basically the wants. It does make things easier. But when you want to balance dunya and akhirah, you want to balance your necessities first. That's what you want to make sure that you balance. Should I put my children in an Islamic school? But if I were to put my children in an Islamic school, that means I won't be capable of affording a beautiful, spacious home in that city. And if I were to put my children in Islamic school, I won't be able to probably afford a very nice car. So Islam tells you, no, not at the expense of your deen and your children's deen. Your children's deen comes first. If you're capable, later on, you've got your children's deen in place, well, and you've got more money, you want to buy a house, go ahead, but not at the expense of your deen. So don't use mortgage, don't use interest. Okay, well, I've got enough money to actually do it halal banking and still pay the down payment. And I'd like to also, and I can afford a nice car. Okay, if you can afford a nice car and it's not supposed to be riba, yes, I can. Well, good for you. There you go. You can balance that way probably more than others. Good for you, but not at the expense of your deen. So what if I cannot afford? It's easy when you have that much money to actually live like that. But when you talk about balance, it's usually because you have some shortage. That's when you would talk about balance, usually because you have a shortage. So in that situation, the principles to consider, Islam considers that the principles came to preserve you. The principles in Sharia came to preserve your life, to preserve your health, to preserve your chastity, your family, to preserve your wealth, to preserve your mental health. And then depending on how important that principle is, Islam is going to come in and tell you, wait a minute, avoid that one, take that one first. You might be influenced by a lot of different things from the community that surrounds you. So that's why Islam comes in to answer those questions for you. That's why Islam will come in and explain to you how comprehensive all the different matters are, and give you the comprehensive explanation, and give you even the details, how, considering the place that it's happening in, considering the time that it's urgent, and also considering the different times that are happening, that things are happening in. So therefore, when we look at different times, for example, I've got my salah, I need to pray right now, but I'm a surgeon. If I were to actually not have the time for salah, can I do Jannah? There we go. Now we're talking about different situations. I'm talking about a matter where there is a considerable thing about time. This person, if I were to leave, that might actually be a dangerous moment, a dangerous thing for that moment. Can I leave for 5 minutes? Can I have a window just to do my salah? Well, great. Now you need to balance it. Now, the other part is that in terms of balance in Islam, it considers that the general community, in other words, the community's rights, is a more important consideration to balance than the individual, considering the individual benefit in where considering the general, the personal, the individual benefit in the light and in the lens that it does not contradict the public benefit as well. Now, those are just different things to help us understand. Now to get to another lens in how we see the fiqh of balance. Number one, everything that you do to balance your dunya and akhirah, you must consider your intention, the ikhlas for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two is that to remove the harm. When you want to balance, you want to make sure that removing the harm is more important than obtaining good and trying to get more in dunya. In other words, removing the harm is more important. So for example, a sister might say, well, if I were to actually go and travel and be probably a blogger where that's going to be some benefit in it. What is the benefit? Well, I'll probably get a lot of followers. I'll probably be making money, and the list goes on, and I'll be able to monetize my channel, and that's going to be, I'll say definitely that is a plus for sure, no doubt. But Islam considers removing the harm and keeping you in a place that you are secure, where no one is going to harm you, is considered a balance and an important priority, and a more important balance than actually getting probably money or probably followers or whatever it is. So removing the harm is a priority. That's why, even though, let's look at alcohol. Even though, yes, opening liquor stores, it does bring in some economical benefit to the society. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mentioned that, well, that mafsada that they carry is more than the good that there is. The mafsada that they carry is more than the good. That is in order to tell us, if there is more harm, then therefore we would disregard the good that might actually be in it. And this is a very important thing in balancing, taking away the harm on your deen, on your nafs, on your health, on your security, removing the harm on your mental health, removing the harm on your chastity, and removing the harm on your wealth, and making sure that you are basically managing things, is more important than somehow seeking a certain other benefit. The most important benefit is to keep you secure and away from harm. Number 3, al-'adatu muhakkima. The culture itself and the circumstances that surround the situation in Sharia, putting the balance and understanding, in where al-hukmu ala al-shay'i far'un an tasawwurihi. In order to make the balance, you have to keep an eye on the different matters in regards to the circumstances that they're in. It's not enough to talk about balance if you don't have the complete picture taken in consideration. To have the complete picture in consideration is to make the right judgment, is to give the right diagnose. Because if you were to make the wrong diagnose, you're going to end up giving the wrong treatment. Giving the wrong treatment is going to actually get the person even more sick. Then what did you do? Wrong diagnose gives the wrong treatment. And of course, therefore, the person ends up regressing even farther. That's why al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi. To understand the circumstance is part of the balance, in where understanding the culture, understanding the circumstances, because in Islam, it also considers, in order to make a balance, al-mashaqqa tajlibu at-taysir. Whenever there's a hardship in Islam, it tells you that the hardship shall bring an alleviation and shall actually bring in ease. The other part is that you might consider based on your perspective and that person's perspective, but Islam teaches us that, just like when we always say, أما أبو حنيفة فقد جعل القرآن مرآته فأبصر الحق. As for Abu Hanifa, he had made the Quran be the lens that he sees through, and he was capable of seeing the truth. This is what Ibn al-Arabi said about Abu Hanifa. But the reason why I wanted to say that is that we don't make our balance based on our perspective, but we make it based on the lens of Quran and Sunnah. Why? Because if you are to say, well, I want to balance, and you put in your definition of balance, then you are seeing without you recognizing from the wrong angle. Many times, if you were to put, for example, a frame up on the wall, when you are really close to it, you would think, I have it all balanced, I have it just right. But sometimes you need to go farther to get a better picture in order to see whether it's tilted or not. When you were really close, you were so much part, as if you are part of that frame, you couldn't even recognize how imbalanced it was. And that's why al-yaqinu la yazulu bil-shak. We don't base our balance definition based on doubt. We would base it on yaqeen. What yaqeen are we talking about? We would talk about the yaqeen through through the lens of Quran and Sunnah. Important note: fiqh of balance and the fiqh of priority is based on Islamic principles and the Islamic legal maxims, and not your personal opinion or the cultural influences or the Western supremacy and their standards. We don't regard what the West wants to consider as a priority, or probably without many considering or without many recognizing, my therapist said such and such. Sorry, your therapist is not necessarily reading through the lens of Quran and Sunnah. We have to consider reading through the lens of Quran and Sunnah in order for us to consider that that priority is actually in place, that priority, that balance is based on the Quran and Sunnah, taking consideration the essence that preceded your existence. So what does fiqh of priority or the fiqh of balance consider as the priority? That's why there is a specialty. That is the fiqh specialty that basically helps you recognize and research, and with the different scholars, they would spend an amount of time to help you consider. That's why we got the different rulings, whether it's haram, halal, wajib, makruh, makruh tanzihi, makruh tahrimi, all these different things, all these different rulings, really just to basically help you balance. Exactly like in physics, where the closer you are to the center and the farther you are to the center, you become heavier, and the farther and the closer you are, and you become basically closer to the center, and therefore not having the same weight. That's why Islam will tell you, well, because you yourself are sitting at the scale, you might not recognize where you should be at in order to weigh your akhirah and not your dunya. To outweigh, to put the weight on your akhirah is what you want to consider. So why would a matter be regarded as a priority over other important matters? So Islam is based on certain principles. Through these principles of fiqh, of prioritization, Islam actually considers that determination, maintaining and bringing stability and balance for your deen, for your nafs, for your aql, for your ird, for your mal, which is DNA, the acronym that we were talking about, is basically in order to consider that as the priority. That is the balance. That's why that doesn't mean that we're disregarding your benefit. It doesn't mean that we're disregarding your benefit. In fact, Your benefit is really the basis of why Sharia was even sent. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The reason why Sharia was sent was really just a mercy to you, to help you balance, because you would be sitting in this, on this scale, you would be sitting in this, on this bridge, and you don't even recognize where you're going. So that's why Sharia was there, to help you balance, to help you recognize where you're going. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم موعظة من ربكم وشفاء لما في الصدور وهدى ورحمة للمؤمنين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, oh people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent you موعظة, a good word, a healing for what is in your chest, even a guidance and even a mercy for all the people. And that's why Ibn al-Qayyim had said, Sharia is actually عدل كلها. Sharia is all about justice and is all about مصالح كلها. Masalih, it's all about to bring you the benefit. And وحكمة كلها, it's all a wisdom. So every matter that goes away from justice to oppression, or from mercy to transgression, or from benefit to harm, then in that situation, it would be considered that it had gotten out from the premise of wisdom to the premise of absurdity, to the premise of going in absurdity, going in destruction, and therefore it is not part of Sharia. Here are the general principles. Everyone, you're going to need this really quick. The principles of Sharia. What are they based on? That DNA acronym. That's your DNA. Look at that right there. Their deen, your nafs, your aql, your health, your mal. Deen. Why is preserving deen the most important thing? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells that the purpose you were created for, the purpose that preceded your existence, was to really test you. How are you going to abide by the principles of the Lord Almighty? Are you going to put your pleasure? Are you going to put your whims as your God, or you consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the center for you? Are you going to consider yourself as the God, or are you going to consider Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Deen considers all your human needs in balance. It does not neglect your needs. It does not neglect your life. It does not neglect your mental health. It does not neglect your chastity and your family and your sexual needs. It does not regret your me and your financial needs. It actually gives you the balance on how to do it right. So therefore, the Prophet ﷺ had actually taught us anywhere. The Umar ibn al-Khattab said, while we were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ, a man dressed in white with very black hair, he comes in and sits right in front of the Prophet ﷺ and says, Ya Muhammad, akhbirni an al-Islam. O Muhammad, tell me about Islam. And he says, الإسلام أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان, and etc. Then he tells them, صدقت, you're right. And they said, and we were really surprised, how is it that he's asking and then responding, you're right? And then he said, tell me about Iman. And he said, Al-Iman, أن تؤمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله واليوم الآخر. Then he says, again, صدقت, you're right. They're confused. Who's the teacher here? Is it him, or who's the teacher? Is it this man that just came in? Or is it the Prophet ﷺ? Who's the teacher? Who's the questioner? Who's the teacher? Who's the student? But when he got to tell me about ihsan, and he said, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه. Now, when you look at this hadith, you could see, of course, at the end, Prophet ﷺ explained to him that was Jibreel عليه السلام, أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. Told Umar ibn Khattab that was Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion. In other words, What was all of this? This was a demonstration to help you understand it through dialogue. Now, what we learn from this hadith that relates to our lecture here is that there was, the first question was Islam. The second question was Iman. The third question, yes, there's Amarat Sa'a, etc. But then the third question was Ihsan. Well, that actually means that there is a balance. To balance your, to get to your Ihsan, there's no way you gotta go through your Islam first. In order to grow with your Islam, you can't jump into Iman right away. And that's what happens with a lot of reverts. They're feeling Iman and the hype of Iman in the beginning, and then they go into this sudden, goes down, and they're like confused. What just happened? And then they would leave Islam, not knowing that in order to grow into the level of Iman, you need to work on taking the level of Islam seriously. And it isn't until you build your house with good foundations are you capable of going up in your building. You cannot go a very high up if your lower building, your lower stories are not strong enough to carry the upper story. It's that simple. Balancing your foundation, your Islam, it makes no sense to try to do Qiyam al-Layl and fail every single time and miss out on Fajr. No, sleep and don't do Qiyam al-Layl if that means at the expense of Fajr. Because Fajr is an obligatory. Balance even your deen and know what to put in first. If you're going to start and wanting to go up, remember, you want to first go up, learn how to give up on the different sins, the different wrong deeds, because that's going to be the gravity. But I can't focus in my salah. Can you tell me what you're doing in your leisure time? What are you doing in your life? Are you intermingling with the wrong people? Who are your friends? Those are the things that are probably taking you down. They're taking you down into the earth, and that's why you can't stand. You can't stand to grow in your deen because you're so grounded into just wanting things on to be entertaining, to be just for dunya. You need to let go in order to grow. Emphasize on your priorities in deen. Priority is to maintain your aqidah. If you're going to school and you're starting to notice that there's an influence on you, you know what? Your deen comes first. Give up on the school. Maybe you need to change the school. Maybe you need to change the department. Maybe you need to change the specialty. If it's at the expense of your deen, we don't want $150,000 or $300,000 a year, or even $1 million a year, whatever it is that you're probably going to be making by entering this field. Your deen is your number one priority. Your deen is your number one priority. If you look at the DNAIM, the West considers the M first, the male, and then sex. The ird is not even discussed. It's really taken, and it's really taking away all the different things that relate to ird, what ird was for in the beginning, to make family, but they're not even making family. Family is stripped away. And the protection of ird, and now we're only getting single parents, and now we're getting only children that are outside of wedlock, and etc. And then you're seeing, oh, even that is gone. And what are you ending up with right now? Mental health. Now we're going the other way. Now you see the day in AIM. Now we're seeing people struggle with their mental health. Now mental health is the number one hot topic everyone is talking about. And then you're later going to see it where you're going to see crime and killing become such an easy thing. Why? Because it goes exactly like the tasbih, like a dominoes. One hits the other and the other hits the other. And then finally, there's no deen at all. It's considering that everything is created and everything is there in absurdity. And therefore, it becomes a secondary thing. To balance, the right balance is to consider your deen first. Your deen means to consider your aqidah. Learning your deen is supposed to be on the top of the list. The top of the list. Wallahi al-azim, uqsim billahi al-azim. To actually have a simple job. Yes, minimum wage. And you getting the basics of halal, wallahi, is more important than actually going high with your money and high with your CV and losing your deen. Yes, we would hope that we would have both, but then sometimes it's hard to attain. So in order to grow in your deen, you need to put your priority in aqidah, in your Islam foundation first, in order to grow into your iman and grow into your ihsan. And of course, consider how to maintain my deen. Seek ilm to seek haqq. Always be part of those that are learning their deen. Always, while you're driving, always have something that is teaching you the right vision in regard to the world around you. Learning tafsir, learning hadith, staying away from the misconceptions. If you've got areas of misconceptions, many are out of curiosity. They're just listening to these misconceptions in universities. Many times are laying out and cornering you with questions. Cornering questions, and you're lost. What should I consider? Stay away from those that spread the misconceptions. Stay away from those misconceptions to maintain your. So that was the previous slide, was to maintain your Islam. This slide, to maintain your iman. Know that the enemy of your iman is shahawat, is whims, the world and body, gravity. In order to grow with your iman, focus on dhikr. Dhikr is not a Sufi word. Dhikr is basically the light. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. Dhikr is a priority. Dhikr is to help you balance. There's the oral dhikr. The oral dhikr is to help you balance whenever you're going through the struggle and you're trying to put in, remember, justice, sabr, and the iffah and the courage that we talked about earlier. If you want to actually have the sabr, you want to have the iffah, you want to have the courage, you have to practice your dhikr. The most important dhikr is Allahu Akbar, to give you al-izzah. The dhikr is to help you stay connected. The important dhikr is Quran and understanding it. The other dhikr, visual dhikr, thinking about the great things in the world around you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in nature, that reflects the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of that. But it's not enough to engage in oral dhikr and visual dhikr, and you're taking some time to engage in visual dhikr, but unless you also put the behavioral dhikr in place. The audio dhikr, what are you listening to? Behavioral dhikr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم. Says, اتقوا الله, have taqwa. Say what is good. Why? Because what you say is going to reflect on your heart, and your heart is basically reflecting and going to be what's going to determine your actions. وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correlated the three. Ittaqullah, that's ittaqwa, is the part that relates to the soul. قُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا, that's the action. يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. You'll see your words vibrating on your heart. And whatever vibrates in your heart basically becomes transcending right there in your actions. And without you recognizing, you might become part of either al-mu'mineen or al-kafirin. That's why the Prophet ﷺ was telling us, Ayatul munafiq thalath. The sign of a munafiq is three things. إذا حدث كذب وإذا وعد أخلف وإذا أتمن خان. When they speak in lies. وإذا وعد أخلف. And when they promise, they would break their promise. And when they are trusted, they would betray. Why did he say that? That's not supposed to be nifaq. That's not supposed to be hypocrisy. That's supposed to be just a behavioral thing. No, but the Prophet is telling you, no, this is hypocrisy. Because the heart itself, if it had absorbed Iman, then you would have seen the reflection in the behavior. So the Prophet ﷺ is telling us how to read the things with balance, with the right vision, with the right lens. Because if you don't connect yourself with the dhikr, you don't connect yourself with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're going to think you're seeing matters based on reality, but what you're really seeing is based on the reality that you want to see, not based on its reality. You don't make a reality. The reality is, and you recognize it. In order to help you keep your balance for your iman, control your shahawat through fasting, learning how to give up on your shahawat, learning how to balance your food, learning how to balance what you drink, learning how to balance how much you spend money. Money management is part of balancing your deen. This is not irrelevant. It is actually at the core of balancing dunya and akhirah. If you're actually suffering through obesity, that means you're not balancing your dunya and your akhirah. If you're actually struggling with your money, that means you're not balancing dunya and akhirah. If you're struggling with your misconceptions, that means you're not balancing the ilm and the amount of ilm that, or how you're learning your Islam. You're actually making an imbalance without you recognizing where's the problem. To reach the level of ihsan, remember, we're actually going through these levels that we talked about earlier. To reach that level, when Islam becomes your heart, your sight, your reason, that's when you will see the beauty of Iman. That's when you will actually see the balance. There's no way that you will be seeing the realities in the world around you and the balance if your heart is contaminated with all the fitan. If the heart is contaminated with all the fitan, you're creating your own vision, you're creating your own realities. But the reality, whenever you go against it, it will strike you, it will hit you right there, right in the forehead, without you recognizing it. It will basically collapse you to the ground. The other part, preserving nafs. That's the second balance. To preserve your nafs, whether we're talking about maintaining life, protecting your life and whatever protects life, but at the same time, considering that to maintain your life actually starts with, number one, maintaining your health. How much are you eating? How much are you spending on coffee and spending on food and spending on maybe even workout? How are you maintaining your health? That's supposed to be a balance. Working out is not a balance for dunya. Working out is a balance for akhirah. Portion control is not an issue of dunya. It's an issue of akhirah. How much you spend on your clothing and how much you spend time. When you're talking about time, energy, and money, that's energy. That's not dunya alone, but that's dunya at the expense of akhirah. So when we say balancing dunya and akhirah, it's actually really starting at your plate. Is that balanced based on the lens of akhirah, or is that getting you really nothing but heavier and heavier from getting strong to go to the akhirah and cross the bridge to the akhirah? And that's why considering one's and others' lives is basically to consider the balance, because life is sacred in Islam. Harming yourself is not considered, oh, well, that's my body. But Islam considers that actually it's an amana. So in order for you to balance, you got to balance and remember that this is an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid suicide and forbid harming your body. Oh, but I'm angry. The only way that I would calm down is basically by me harming my hand or me cutting my hands or cutting myself. No, that's actually a forbidden way in Islam to ease your pains. That's inflicting pain to something that you don't have the right to inflict pain on. That's sacred. Your body is sacred. Find different means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful towards this priority. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered that even when something is putting your life at risk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you the permission to do that haram thing in order to keep your life preserved, preserving your mind and the mental health. Mind health determines, or mental health determines the person accountable or not. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, رُفِعَ الْقَلَمُ عَنْ ثَلَاثَ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold three accountable: when the person is asleep until they wake up, or when a person is young and until they reach the age of puberty, or when a person loses their mind until they become sane again. Now that's why in Islam, maintaining certain things to maintain mental health, abstaining from intoxicants, pure and halal and thoughtful resources, mind is basically a method for iman elevation. All of that is considered, because Islam considers mental health as a priority. Maintaining ird, balancing the part about ird, whether you're considering all the different things that will lead you to zina as things that you completely need to avoid, whether it's probably intermingling with men, or men intermingling with women, or probably looking at things that are haram to look at, or whether it's practicing hijab. All of that is the way to help you balance dunya and akhirah. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that you should not do it, you should, as the Prophet said, ما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم. What I ordered you to do as much as you can. But what I ordered you to forbid or to abstain from, stop immediately. Maintaining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had preserved the family and the obligations, one, for the sake of parenting, for the sake of children, for the sake of healthy individuals, healthy community, your private parts, in order to continue in preserving you from STDs and so forth, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered a number of different matters as a priority to help you balance your dunya and your akhirah. Preserving wealth is the final one. To balance dunya and akhirah, you need to look at the source, make sure that the source is halal. How it's spent is the second part of it. Now, considering those balances is basically to help you be aware of your weaknesses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that He's guiding you. يريد الله ليبين لكم ويهديكم سنن الذين من قبلكم ويتوب عليكم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to show you the guidance, in order. Yahdi. Who is doing all of this recording? The recording, please. Don't stop anything, just leave it. Okay. وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ سُنَنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. The main thing was really to balance people, to help them recognize their priorities, and therefore, okay, what's going on? Okay. The other part, and the final one, is that something of high virtue, but may make it wrong. If you're doing it at the wrong time, although it may be of high virtue, but doing it at the wrong time can actually make it a wrong action. In where the Prophet Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he actually said that there are certain actions that we should be doing at night, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not accept it in the day. Now, that's the same thing. There are certain things that to put it in the right place, to put it in the right action, is basically understanding it in the balance that it is in. Priorities in life from standpoint. In Islam, when you're talking about worship, al-ibadat, the basic things, as-salah, as-siyam, zakah, and hajj. Those are the basic things. In transactions, maintain justice within the general community is basically coming first. Habits such as dress code, marriage, inheritance, that's number 3. And of course, that's why even in fiqh, considering tahara was always the first chapter. The second chapter would be worship. The third chapters in fiqh would be the fiqh of transaction. The fourth chapters, they would be regarding in habits or different adat, let's say, related to that, whether we're talking about marriage, fara'id, or laws of inheritance, etc. And finally, the criminal law. Now, this is, of course, to help us. I'm so sorry, but I'll just leave it at here so I can answer and give room for questions and answers, inshallah. So if you have any questions, I'll be right now allowing you to unmute yourselves. So raise your hands so we can unmute one after another, inshallah. It does allow you to raise your hand if there are any questions.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykha.
Walaikum salam. So it is DNAIM. I will put it up right there, inshallah. Walaikum salam.
So one of the co-hosts, Bilan, is having some internet difficulties. So inshallah ta'ala, I will do the conclusion, and then I can also help out with the questions in terms of if anybody has questions, inshallah.
It seems like there are no questions. So I guess, inshallah, we'll end it right here.
Oh, wait, Assalamu alaikum. I'm so sorry. I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, I guess, essentially, I don't know if you guys are able to hear me, but, over time, like, how do you get past, like, the routine aspect of, like, ibadah? So, like, you're so used to praying 5 times a day. Like, how do you go back to, like, connecting your heart to it, just so you can continue to prioritize it and it's like still meaningful to you?
So number one is understanding the meaning of salah. Number two is putting the effort to prepare yourself for salah. And what number three is taking away the different distractions that might distract you from focusing on what the words are saying. And number four is putting the effort to learn what the words are saying, to connect yourself. And number five, what is even outside of salah is, without you recognizing, it does become part of what influences you during salah. So in other words, when you're outside in your day-to-day and you're probably engaging in haram things, you're going to find that such haram things will come to you during salah and distract you from focusing on your salah. So you want to, let's say, invest also at other times to help you grow in your focus in your salah. So some of the things you had mentioned, teens, some of the things that a teen is usually struggling with, of course, they have the urge during adolescent years to navigate the world, navigate social dynamics, the people around them, etc., the world, the money, all of these different things, the fame, the popularity, all these different things. They become a place of attraction because they will think that, oh, if only I were to get this money or this degree or these people, I'll probably get the privilege of getting more and more dunya. But it isn't until they grow older they recognize that even if the whole world had somehow given you the Elon Musk's money and you were as famous as who knows the most famous person, that will not increase or decrease anything from you. You're basically going to be facing the reality of the world. Simple things like illnesses or whatever it is will not be removed. So that's when you would recognize your human weakness. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you that in order to recognize your ubudiyyah lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it really starts, when you want to recognize your ubudiyyah lillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it really starts with recognizing the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It starts with recognizing the magnificence, but there's no way to recognize the magnificence if you're living in arrogance. Arrogance takes away your ability to focus and see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's magnificence. So what should I do? How do I do it? You do it. The Prophet ﷺ taught us to make the dua. Allahumma inna nas'aluka fi'l al-khayrat wa tark al-munkarat wa hubb al-masakin. A formula of three things. Number one, hubb or fi'l al-khayrat, to love and do what is good. Two, to tark al-munkarat, to abstain from the things that are evil. And three, hubb al-masakin. How am I going to be able to live and embrace al-khayrat and abstain from al-munkarat? So the Prophet ﷺ is giving you the formula, hubb al-masakin, love the needy. Don't look for dunya, but we with those simple people, go and visit maybe the senior homes and visit the sick and visit the orphans and be in those areas where you're finding needy people, instead of going to the Bahamas and going to probably Disneyland and Disney World. No, take the time to go to Africa, go to Bangladesh, and really see the people that are needy there. By switching and alternating your vision from only reading the stories of the rich and those that are living in the upper class, you're connecting yourself with the masakin. That's when you'll take away and wash away your arrogance. When you wash away your arrogance, then you'll be capable of recognizing the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I hope I answered that.
Jazakallahu khairan. Our Shaykh, sorry, Afwan, I was having internet issues. I am back. Inshallah, we will conclude our session. And I want to thank everyone who attended, and I want to thank our Shaykh, Dr. Aysha Wazwaz. This was such an honor to have you with us today. Alhamdulillah, as I said earlier, you are a mentor to many, including myself. You have encouraged us to pursue knowledge, and I know a lot of people have benefited from this session today. And inshallah, as the Shaykh said, our priority should always be, and the advice of the Prophet ﷺ, that seeking knowledge is obligation upon all of us, inshallah. So let us continue to, even if it's so small, like one ayah a day, that you learn the tafsir of it, right? Because the most beloved deeds to Allah are the most smallest. So inshallah, let us take the advice. And wa sallallahu wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakallahu khairan, Shaykh.
وإياكم. السلام عليكم.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykha.
وعليكم السلام.
So a sister sent this to me privately to ask this question. She said, how to cry to Allah. It is really hard for me, but I want to cry to Allah, but no tears come out.
So a number of different things actually happen when the heart becomes hard. Why does the heart become hard? The heart becomes hard when the person is so connected to dunya. Visit the grave. Go and visit the graves and just read the numbers. Just read the dates on there. And while you're visiting the graves, just take a moment to just sit and recognize in silence. Be there when people are mourning their dead. Go and visit the sick. Be there and reduce from the different things that you're getting in dunya. Maybe reduce the amount of time you spend on social media. Reduce the amount of time you're spending in entertainment. Reduce the amount of entertainment, whether it's sweets, coffee, and all these different things that you're getting as privileges, and without you considering, if you're considered too hard-hearted from even crying, that means you're not recognizing the seriousness of the world around you. Ibn al-Adham used to say, when he would see other people crying while he was giving a lecture, he would cry. And he would say, I'm weeping and crying over myself because I'm seeing that other people are crying. And I'm just wondering if they had heard me say something that I didn't hear myself even saying it. In other words, I was too hard-hearted that I didn't even hear what I was saying myself, that I might be guiding others, but then myself, I forgot to listen to what I am saying. Taking the moment, my dear, just like the previous question, taking the moment to reduce from dunya, it will get you closer to akhirah. Reducing the dunya, reducing the entertainment. I made a series about luxury. Reducing the luxury that you're living in is going to get you closer to akhirah. It's exactly like balance. The less of dunya you invest in, the more you'll find yourself getting into akhirah. The less laughter and entertainment you put in, you're going to find yourself more tears coming by themselves. Reduce the laughter. Reduce what causes laughter. Reduce what causes all that happiness of dunya, that comfort in dunya, and you will see yourself weeping because you'll start seeing akhirah. It's an issue of vision. It's exactly like when you look at it at one point, everything that surrounds it becomes blurry. When you blur dunya, you'll be capable of seeing akhirah. That's when you'll cry. But when akhirah is blurred in your sight and all you see is dunya, you're just engaging in laughter. It's an issue of the angle of vision. If you see Akhirah, listen about Akhirah. You just by imagining the Akhirah in itself and knowing more about it and learning more about it, and how even the prophets will be so afraid, there's no way that anybody can fathom, imagine that and not cry. You'll be like, what does it mean? How can this amount of fear at all be something that anybody can imagine? Just by thinking about it, learning about it, you'll find yourself really taking your focus from seeing dunya. Automatically it'll start seeing akhirah, and your heart will tremble and you will tear and you will see yourself getting goosebumps and you will see your heart changing. And guess what? Then you will get into halawatil iman, the beauty of iman, that you will not actually want to give up on. You might say, well, why do I need to reduce that? No, you will start having halawatil iman, which is even sweeter than the laughter that you were getting for dunya. That's why the Salihin used to say, if the kings and the queens would have known, and the princes, they would have known the joy that we're living in after Qiyam al-Layl, they would have come, لَجَالَدُونَ عَلَيْهِ بِالسُّيُوفِ, they would have come to fight us just to take it away from us, because the amount of joy in Qiyam al-Layl, in dhikr, is a lot more than the joy that somebody might get in dunya of probably eating or probably pleasure, dancing, whatever it is. That joy in dunya as a result of any of what we might do to somehow let our body feel some kind of joy is going to be nothing but sadness after it, because we recognize that we see it in the rise of the depression statistics that are constantly on the rise. Why? Because we recognize that we were manipulating ourselves. We thought by dancing, by being with our friends, by going out, that somehow this was fun, we're having some kind of entertainment, when in reality we're just fooling ourselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't fool yourself. What really would make you happy, happiness is not on the outside. Whether you wore a name brand or whatever it is, happiness is not on the outside. Happiness is on the inside. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ. The real طمأنينة, the real happiness, is what comes from the inside, not the outside. So people would think by putting on the outside, that's why we're getting more and more people be classified as depressed and classified and dealing with all of these anxiety and etc. So they're classified as dealing with all of that, but to be honest, a lot of it is actually a wrong classification. It's an khuwa ruhi. It wasn't supposed to be classified as a mental illness. Not always. Sometimes it is, definitely, but a lot of it is put in the wrong category. When it's put in the wrong category, that means you're not giving it the right treatment. And that's why we're ending up with a lot of people being put in the category of mental illness and anxiety and depression, when in reality, it was really just khuwa ruhi. A lot of them. So it's not to say every single person that's depressed is having khuwa ruhi, okay? But a lot of it is actually khuwa ruhi. I hope I answered that one. Assalamu alaikum. I had a question. What if sometimes you have trouble with your niyyah and always contemplating if you're really doing a good deed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So in the beginning, you will always always be questioning yourself, and shaitan will be, let me say, abusing your fear, and will constantly tell you, oh, you're probably doing it for the sake of people. You're probably doing it just to be recognized for whatever you did. In the beginning, it would be like a Wazwaz that shaitan is giving you, but then don't stop the good deed, even if you were to get the Wazwaz, because then you're confirming and affirming what feelings were, what the feelings were generated in. So when you get such feelings, just focus on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and focus on doing it according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to the sunnah, and you will see little by little that your sincerity, inshallah, is in place. Don't stop the good action. Continue doing good, even if you get some kind of a feeling that you're probably doing it for the wrong intention. Continue doing what is good. Little by little, inshallah, you will be capable of taking, and that ta'ifun min ash-shaytan, you'll be taking it away like an expert, and then you'll only be focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do I know if I really have ikhlas? Al-ikhlas istiwa al-madh with them. If to you, whether eulogy, praise, or whether put downs are to you equal, you won't let go. When people are mocking you because of your hijab and calling you fat, or calling you look old, or a granny, or whatever it is, but to you that doesn't matter. You don't give up on your hijab, because to you, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most important thing to you. That's how you know you have ikhlas. When people mocking you, doesn't matter to you. To you, I'm doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyways. They can say whatever they want. That's how you know. When in praise, same thing. Whether people praised you or not is not of concern for you. Here's a question: how to advise converts to get the initial iman high back? I do actually have a number of different lectures in where I talk about Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. So inshallah, I'll be sending that one because it's a lot of details, inshallah. So this is it, inshallah. We will, inshallah, see you all later. Assalamu alaikum.